It is a solemn thought that our love for God is measured by our everyday relationships with others, except as its validity is proven in standing the test of daily life with our fellow men. Our love for God may be found to be a delusion.
The missing link, profiting from the Word, next on So What? Hi, I'm Don Waite.
And I'm Chris Dorman.
And welcome back to So What? Chris, it has been a long journey through A.W. Pink's book, Profiting from the Word, but we are on our last, as we promised, our last podcast in this series. And, as we were thinking about how we might wrap it up, we realized that there is one key element and one barrier. If there was one thing we could identify that would be a barrier to loving, it would be this.
I think so. We've been talking for the last couple of months about 1 Corinthians 13 and the final chapter of A.W. Pink's book, Profiting from the Words, about the Scriptures and love. How do we know we're profiting from the Word when we read about love? And the emphasis of Pink's chapter is on brotherly love. Right. And that's what we talked about, the importance of brotherly love. Jesus said, the world will know you belong to me. The world will know you're my disciples by your love for one another. In 1 John says, look, you can't love God if you don't love your brother. Loving your brother is really the evidence, the fruit, really, that you love God. And 1 Corinthians 13 is all about brotherly love in the church. Agape love. Agape love.
Right.
And so we understand now what love is. We understand what love is not. But, okay, and that's all good and that's fine. And we are to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, with all of our soul, and with all our mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. We know the vital importance of love. So then why don't we? Simple question.
Great question. And honestly, if we can't answer this question, if we can't get down to it, we probably will never make progress in it.
Right. Right.
And so I know you're asking yourself, what is that one thing?
When you think about the life of Christ, when you think of the Son of Man, what comes to your mind? I think of his great love, and I think of his great patience, and I think of his sacrifice and the torment, and mercy. I think of his mercy, and that he rose again, and that he reigns, and that he rules, and I think about all those things. But in his role as our Messiah, there was one particular thing that really was the key to everything else.
I know you know it now, right? Humility.
Jesus said he came to do his Father's will, and he told us that we can do nothing apart from him. And Jesus said, I've only come to do his will. My food is to do his will. I'm nothing. He is everything. I live to do his will. Right. Everything in his life started from his humility. Andrew Murray, in his classic work entitled Humility, says that humility is the soil from which all other Christian virtue takes root, is birthed. And if love is the badge of our Christian profession, as A.W. Pink said, well, in order for us to love, we must first be humble. Right. And without humility, friends, we will never, ever have or be able to express agape love. Because fundamentally, agape love is about loving others, putting others before ourselves. It's completely selfless. Love is patient. It is long-suffering. Why don't we suffer long? See? Because our pride is pricked. Right? Why do we envy? Love doesn't envy. Love doesn't boast. But do we envy? Do we boast?
Right.
Yes. That's pride. It's pride. It's a lack of humility. When you think of the Sermon on the Mount, the Sermon on the Mount is really, this is the Christian life, friends. Oh, what is the Christian life? Read Matthew 5, 6, 7. Read those chapters. This is really what the Christian life should look like, okay? Well, how does it begin?
Where does it start? Yes. Right? Blessed are the poor in spirit.
The beatitude, the first beatitude. You really want to live this Christian life?
Yep.
Really? Do you really want to live without lust? Do you really want to live without hate? Do you really want to live this way? Well, you know what? It starts way, way back in verse 3 of chapter 5. Blessed are the poor in spirit,
Right.
for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah. Amazing. Look at the beginning of Jesus' ministry, John, who was, comes crashing into the scene, right? John the Baptist. And he was, by all accounts, like, people were drawn up. They wanted to see the spectacle of what he was.
He was a rock star.
Right? Yes, absolutely. And he says what? He says, I must decrease and he must increase.
Wow.
I must take a back seat. He must be exalted. I am not worthy to even undo the thongs of his sandals, untie his sandals. I am nothing. The Apostle Paul, right? I have this great pedigree. If you think you have a reason to boast, I much more. And he gives you the litany, his resume of how, his great pedigree. And he says, but I am nothing, and everything is dung compared to the surpassing greatness of knowing Jesus, right? Jesus in Philippians, and Paul calls it out. It's like, look, he who is God did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but rather what? Took on the form of a servant.
Humbled himself.
Man.
When Jesus is describing greatness, okay? When Jesus describes greatness, what does he say? He says it's about being a servant. What does he do? He demonstrates that by putting on a towel and taking on the role of a house slave and washing the filthy feet of the disciples. You call me Lord, you call me Master. That's what I am. But you know what? This is what it's all about. You don't do that if humility isn't the prism through which you look at all of life. And friends, we will never love. We will never love the way we're supposed to love until we see ourselves as we truly are.
Right.
Poor in spirit. That word that Jesus used in Matthew 5:3 is tochas, and it's the worst kind of poverty that exists. It means you are completely, totally, wholly, 1001% dependent on the mercy of others in order to survive. If they don't give you a sliver of bread, you don't eat. If they don't give you a penny out of their jar, you don't have any money. Without the help of others, you can't survive. And beloved, Jesus said that unless we see ourselves that way,
Right.
we can't be happy. Blessed are, happy are the poor, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Beloved, we were created. We're creatures. We were created to find our highest joy in being at his feet and serving him, as being empty vessels that he can fill. But the curse is that we don't see ourselves that way. We see ourselves as special and powerful and independent.
Don't you know who I am? Right? I mean, that attitude of, it can be so subtle. Honestly, it can be so subtle. It's not necessarily just the guy out there kind of beating his breast and making a spectacle of himself. I mean, that happens. That's easy to identify. Yeah. But many times it's very, very subtle. It can even be in the guise of being humble.
Yeah.
People can take pride in their humility. It's crazy, right?
It's true.
I'm the humblest guy in the world. Yeah, and we can chuckle at that, but that's how insidious it can actually be.
And friends, because being prideful is just natural. It's our natural state. It's our natural state to look out for number one. Right. And you're not number one. I'm number one.
Right.
Now he's mistaken because he thinks he's number one. Okay, but that's our natural state. Since the fall, that's the curse in all of us. And so pride is the hardest thing for us to see because it's so natural for us. It is, and and so therefore, we see everything through the prism of how is this going to benefit me? How can I gain from this? Or how can I not be embarrassed by this? Or what's in it for me? And agape says, what's in it for him? It's all about him, Lord. You tell me where you want me. It doesn't matter if I'm advantaged or not. It doesn't make any difference because my role here is to serve. My role here is to reflect your glory, not seek my own. My role here is to honor you with this life. And so, Lord, use me as you will. Do with me what you will. But please honor yourself.
Yeah.
That kind of heart loves. It loves. It will suffer long. It will be patient. It will be kind. It will not envy. It will not boast. It will not be rude. It will not be self-seeking. It will not keep a record of wrongs. It will not do that. It won't, because it's not looking out for itself.
And that is a heart that is willing to take the good and the bad in those relationships. And that allows us to then abide, to hang in there, to not fail,
Yep.
right? But even when I've been wrong, to say, I'm going to keep loving you. I'm going to keep on loving you.
Just like Jesus. Right? We've said before, you can't out-sin the love of Christ for you.
Right.
Right? And an agape love is a love that's first and foremost, it's humble. It sees itself for who he truly is. We are beggars before God. We are nothing without him. We can't function without him. We can't do a right thing, think a right thought without him. Do you understand that? Do you believe that? Or do you think that as you mature in faith like a child, we raise our children to be independent. We raise them to grow and to mature and to stand on their own 2 feet. In Christ, as we mature, we don't get higher, we get lower.
Right. We don't become more independent. We become more dependent on him.
Yeah.
Right. Do you see this? Do you see how vital this is? Why we would call this the missing link?
Yeah.
Without this, the whole chain is broken. Like, we can't pull it together. Like, we have no ability to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and love this way.
No way.
That's the antithesis of what God is telling us.
Can you muster it up inside yourself?
No.
You can fake it, I guess, for a while,
Right.
probably.
Right.
But it won't be real.
Honestly, I don't think we can even begin to have a true desire for this kind of love without humility. We can know intellectually that we're called to love, but to love like this, to actually love and have a real desire to love like this, it requires a person to be brought low. It requires my heart to hang loosely to myself. I think that's, again, what Paul's, talking to the Corinthians about in 2 Corinthians. It's like, look, I don't want you to be unaware of what we went through in Asia. We got to the point of death, and the sentence of death was written upon our hearts. And why did God do this? That we might not trust in ourselves, but in him who raises the dead. We need to get brought to an end of ourselves over and over and over and over again to show us that it's not about me. It's just not about me. And I got to be emptied of my self-interest so that I can love him and love others the way I'm called to.
That's right. So friends, without humility, if you're wondering, okay, I understand I'm supposed to love. How do I do that? You know what? It starts with humility. Mm-hmm. It does. It starts there. Just like in the Sermon on the Mount, the first beatitude. You want to live the Christian life? You got to be humble. Do you really want to love? Do you really want to have agape love and reflect that love to others? Then it starts with humility. You look at the life of Christ and you think of how he lived and how he died and how he served and how he described himself. He described himself as humble and lowly. And until we are, we will never love like he does.
With that context, I would encourage you, go back and read the Gospels with that in mind. See that in Jesus. It comes alive. You see that. Read Paul's epistles, read Acts, and see how these men interacted with people, and you realize that this is really a driving factor in all their lives.
Yeah.
What else can lead a person to rejoice in suffering as they bring the gospel to bear in other people's lives? That they were counted worthy to suffer for his name's sake.
To sing hymns and praises as their backs are bleeding.
Right? That's
Humble.
otherworldly, man.
It's humility. It's humility. It's seeing that we're here for him. That we should be empty vessels for him to fill. Not our agendas, not our desires. It's whatever he wants. Let him fill us and lead us. That's humility.
So as we close it up, I know we really hope that you profit from the Word of God. If you've watched us for any length of time, you know that the Bible, that God's Word is the most important thing to us in this podcast. So we want to bring forth, what does the Word have to say? And what's the fruit then that it should bear in our lives? And we've been talking about that, and we hope that you see that love, being driven by humility, ultimately is going to be the greatest indicator of whether or not you're getting anything out of your time in the Word in the Bible. Not how much you know, not being able to win an argument, not being theologically astute and having a big library. Although I love big libraries, it's awesome. He's got a great library, he really does. But
he's not envying.
Right, exactly. In great humility, but this is how we would know. Like, be honest with ourselves. I'm lacking in this. Help me to grow, Lord. Help me to grow in this humility, to become less self-interested, less self-dependent, more dependent on you.
That's right. The path to Christ is to go lower and lower and lower, that He might lift us up. Humble yourself, that He may lift you up.
There you go.
That He may lift you up in due time, when He decrees in His time. Friends, we're going to take a bit of a break.
Mm-hmm.
You won't see us for about 3 weeks. We both have family commitments and other things that are going to keep us away from each other for the next little bit. So we're not going to be back to you for about 3 weeks or so, maybe 4 weeks.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit. But in the meantime, we're preparing our next series. Do you want to tell them the title of the series?
Father Knows Best. And for those who are old enough, you'll remember the shows at least in syndication. Father Knows Best.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Father Knows Best. That's our next series.
And you thought this series was long.
It's important, though, friends. We've covered a lot of ground, and this podcast has been around now for 6 years. And we have covered a lot of very, very important ground. And as we've been talking about it, we don't know that this next series isn't the most important yet. Your Father knows best. And all the implications of that. I'm very, Pastor Bobish, I'm very, very excited about it. I really am, and humbled by the opportunity as well. We do appreciate you tuning in. We truly are very, very grateful, and I'll talk to you soon.
We'll see you soon.
I took your phrase. Sorry about that.
That's great.